When she ordered him to play the violin in front of all the guests, she expected to humiliate him, but the first notes that came from that instrument made the entire ballroom fall silent, and what happened next changed both their lives forever. Miguel adjusted the collar of his uniform for the 10th time that morning. The cheap fabric itched his neck, but he couldn't complain. Not when he needed that job more than ever. At 34, he had lost his mother 6 months earlier, and the medical bills still bled into his tight budget. The Almeida mansion rose before him like a golden castle, Italian marble, crystal chandeliers, gardens that looked like works of art. Miguel took a deep breath and rang the back doorbell, the staff entrance. "You're late," grumbled Dona Carmen, the housekeeper. "Mrs. Helena is nervous about tonight's party. Deputies, businessmen, important people. You can't make a single misstep." Miguel nodded silently. He had worked there for 3 years, always invisible, always efficient. He knew every room, every habit of the family. He knew that Helena Almeida woke up at 6 a.m. for her Pilates class, that her husband, Dr. Roberto, never came down for breakfast, and that their teenage daughter, Beatriz, spent her days locked in her room. "Miguel!" Helena's sharp voice echoed down the hall. "Come here, now." He found her in the office, a 45-year-old woman with platinum blonde hair, flawless nails, and a dress that cost more than his yearly salary. She was on the phone, gesturing with irritation. "No, you don't understand. The violinist canceled at the last minute." "What do you mean the flu? My party starts in 2 hours." Miguel stood still, waiting. Helena hung up and stared at him with those cold blue eyes. "Do you play any instruments?" The question caught him off guard. For a moment, his hands trembled. He thought of his mother, Dona Rosa, a seamstress who dreamed of seeing him play the violin. He remembered the lessons she paid for with great sacrifice, the nights he practiced on the little borrowed violin. I used to play the violin, ma'am, but it's been a while." Helena raised an eyebrow. "Perfect. You'll substitute for the musician tonight. There's a violin in the attic, my mother-in-law's. Put on something more presentable and play a few classical pieces during dinner." "But ma'am, I'm not a professional musician. I'm just what?" "My employee. And you'll do as I say." She stepped closer, her expensive perfume invading his space. "Or would you prefer to look for another job?" Miguel lowered his eyes. The bills, the debts, the house he was still paying off. He had no choice. "Yes, ma'am." Helena smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. "Perfect. And Miguel, don't disappoint me. My guests are very important people. I can't appear unprepared." 2 hours later, Miguel was in the dusty attic, holding a violin that looked over 100 years old. The instrument was out of tune, the strings tense, but even so, his hands recognized the shape, the weight, the texture. He closed his eyes and remembered his mother saying, "Music is the language of the soul, Miguel. No matter where you are, it will always be inside you." He tuned the violin slowly, each note awakening memories he had buried. His first job at 16 to help at home. The violin sold to buy medicine, dreams locked away in dusty drawers. "Miguel!" Helena shouted from downstairs. "The guests are arriving!" He came down the stairs wearing Dr. Roberto's borrowed suit, too big but presentable. The ballroom had been transformed. Giant floral arrangement, decorated tables, elegant people chatting in groups. Miguel positioned himself in the assigned corner, violin in hand. Some guests glanced at him with curiosity. Others didn't even notice his presence. He was, once again, part of the decor. Helena approached with a glass of champagne in hand, smiling at a distinguished couple. "This is my personal violinist," she said, her voice laced with something Miguel couldn't quite identify. "Miguel, play something beautiful for our guests." He placed the violin on his shoulder, feeling the familiar weight. His hands trembled slightly, but when the first notes of Schubert's Ave Maria flowed from the instrument, something magical happened. The music filled the room like a golden river. The conversations faded. The laughter fell silent. All eyes turned to him. Miguel no longer saw anyone. He was back in the small childhood apartment, playing for his mother, who smiled with tears in her eyes. The music ended in absolute silence. For 3 seconds that felt eternal. No one moved. Then, an elderly lady began to applaud. Then another. In a matter of moments, the entire room was on its feet, clapping with fervor. Helena remained still, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. This wasn't what she had expected. This wasn't an employee playing basic notes. This was art. This was soul. This was something her money could never buy. "Where did you learn to play like that?" asked Congressman Fernandez, approaching Miguel. Before he could respond, Helena cut in. "Miguel is full of hidden talents. Aren't you, Miguel?" There was something dangerous in her tone, a silent warning. Miguel merely nodded. but he felt that something had changed irrevocably in that room, and he decided to accept it, even if he knew the price. During the following week, Miguel couldn't get that night out of his head. The applause still echoed in his ears, but so did Helena's expression. First surprise, then anger, then something he couldn't decipher. In the staff locker room, he found Carla, the cook who had been working there for 15 years. "You drew too much attention, Miguel," she whispered, looking around. "The madam doesn't like it when we stand out. We're invisible for a reason. I only did what she asked. She asked you to play background music. She didn't ask you to do what you did." Carla sighed. "Did you see how she looked? She didn't expect you to be good." Miguel felt a knot in his stomach. She was right. Helena had asked for ambient music, not a performance that stole the spotlight. But when he picked up the violin, something inside him awakened, something that had been asleep for years. "Did I do something wrong?" "Not wrong. Dangerous." Carla touched his arm. "People like her don't like to be surprised. She wants total control. And you showed her something she can't buy." At that moment, Helena appeared at the locker room door. "Miguel, my office. Now." Carla stepped away quickly. Miguel followed Helena down the marble hallways, his heart pounding. She made him sit in the chair across from her desk, like a student in front of the principal. "You deceived me," she said bluntly. "Ma'am? You said you played violin. You didn't say you were a virtuoso." Helena stood and began walking around the desk. "Do you know what happened after you left yesterday? 3 of my guests asked where I found you. Congressman Fernandez even suggested you should perform at official events." Miguel didn't know whether that was good or bad. "So I thought," Helena continued, "why not use this to my advantage? You're going to play at more of my events. Dinners, parties, social gatherings. You'll be my private musician, but my regular work remains. During the day, you clean, tidy up, do what you've always done. At night, when I need you, you play. For the same salary, of course." Miguel felt his stomach sink. "Ma'am, playing the violin isn't just pressing buttons. I need time to practice to what? You played perfectly yesterday." Helena smiled, but it was a sharp smile. "Or were you lying about being rusty?" He was cornered. If he said he needed to practice, she'd know he had lied about his skill. If he agreed, he'd be forced to perform without proper preparation. Very well, ma'am. Excellent. There's an intimate dinner tonight. 15 people. Congressmen, businessmen." Helena stepped closer again, her expensive perfume invading his space. "And Miguel, wear something better. I can't have my violinist looking like like what you are." She dismissed him with a gesture. Miguel left the office feeling dirty, used. He was no longer just an employee. He was an object, a piece of sophisticated decor. In the hallway, he ran into Beatriz, Helena's teenage daughter. She was leaning against the wall, clearly having overheard everything. "You shouldn't have agreed," she said quietly. "I didn't have a choice. We always have a choice. You chose to stay." Beatrice, at 16, had a disturbing maturity. "My mother collects people. The more talented, the better." "She doesn't want you to shine. She wants to use your shine to make herself look interesting." Miguel looked at her carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know what it's like to be her property." Beatrice sighed. "She enrolled me in piano lessons when I was 5. Not because I wanted it, but because it looked good to have a prodigy daughter. When I realized I hated piano, she said I was ungrateful. And now I pretend. I play when she says, smile when she wants, act like the perfect daughter in public." Beatrice looked at him with sadness. "But I'm not happy. And you won't be either." Miguel spent the rest of the day thinking about the girl's words. When the time for dinner came, he had made a quiet decision. He would play, yes, but on his own terms. He wore the borrowed suit. Helena had bought a new one, more expensive, that made him look like a mannequin. The guests arrived on time. Middle-aged men, women covered in jewelry, conversations about politics and business. "Miguel, play something lively," Helena ordered, waving her hand like he was a trained dog. He positioned the violin, and instead of something cheerful, he began to play Massenet's Meditation, a melancholic, deep piece that spoke of solitude and inner searching. The music filled the room like fog, changing the atmosphere. Conversations stopped. Laughter died down. Some guests closed their eyes. Others looked visibly moved. Helena glared at him. This wasn't what she had asked for. But she couldn't stop the music without causing embarrassment in front of her guests. When the final note faded into the air, the silence was broken by applause even more intense than the previous week. "Extraordinary," murmured Congressman Fernandez. "Where did you study music?" Miguel took a deep breath. "My mother taught me the first chords. She was a seamstress, but she dreamed of seeing me play." I took a few lessons as a child, but had to stop to work. Your mother must be very proud. She died last year. Miguel didn't know why he was saying that. She never got to see me play in a place like this. The silence that followed was different. Not of admiration, but of discomfort. The truth had broken into that fantasy world. Helena stood up abruptly. Miguel, please play something more cheerful. But one of the guests, an elderly woman with white hair, spoke first. No, dear. Let him play whatever he wants. True music comes from the soul, not from commands. Helena forced a smile, but Miguel saw the fury in her eyes. He played 2 more pieces, each more emotional than the last. When he finished, some guests came up to speak to him, to learn his story. Helena watched it all with growing irritation. This wasn't what she had planned. She wanted an employee who played background music, not an artist who stole the spotlight. When the guests left, she called him again. You disobeyed me, she said, her voice low and dangerous. I played the way I know how. You turned my party into a spectacle about your personal life. No one wants to hear about your dead mother or your hardships. Her words hit Miguel like punches. He felt something burn inside his chest. My mother. Your mother was a seamstress. You're a janitor who plays the violin. Don't confuse talent with importance. Helena stepped closer, her face inches from his. Next time, you'll play what I tell you, the way I tell you. Or you can look for another job. Miguel stared at her for a long moment. He wanted to say so much, to scream, to put the violin down and walk away. But the bills, the debts, reality held him in place. Yes, ma'am, he murmured. Helena smiled, satisfied. Excellent. Now go. And clean the guest bathroom before you leave. There's a stain on the mirror. Miguel left the room feeling smaller than ever. In the hallway, he found Beatrice again. She looked him in the eye and laughed. You? In a place like this? They'll destroy you. I warned you, she said softly. My mother can't stand it when someone is more interesting than she is. Then why am I still here? Because you haven't reached your limit yet. Beatrice looked at him with eyes too wise for her age. But when you do, you'll find out who you really are. Miguel took the violin and climbed the stairs to store it in the attic. Up there, alone in the dust and memories, he held the instrument against his chest and cried. He cried for the mother who would never see him play on a real stage. He cried for the dreams he had buried. He cried for the dignity he was slowly losing. And he cried because, deep down, he knew Beatrice was right. He hadn't reached his limit yet. What he didn't know was that that night would be far more cruel than he could ever imagine. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner. Miguel had become Helena's personal violinist, performing at events 2 or 3 times a week. Each performance was a silent torture. He played bland songs, smiled when told to, and accepted the compliments that were directed at Helena for having discovered such talent. That Thursday morning, Miguel was cleaning the office when he found an open piece of mail on the desk. He hadn't meant to read it, but the letterhead caught his attention. National Conservatory of Music. His hands trembled as he picked up the letter. It was an invitation for Helena to participate in a charity event, where her talented violinist would give a special performance for potential donors. The event would be broadcast live nationwide. Interesting, isn't it? Helena's voice made him jump. She was standing in the doorway, smiling. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to. It's fine. I actually wanted you to see it. Helena walked in, taking the letter from his hands. Do you know what this means? National exposure. My name associated with an exceptional talent. It'll be perfect for my political campaign. Political campaign? I'm planning to run for federal deputy next year. Imagine the image. Helena Almeida, the woman who discovered and supported talent from the working class. She smiled, but it was a calculated smile. You'll be my personal success story. Miguel felt his stomach turn. Ma'am, playing on national television, that's serious. I'd need time to prepare, maybe a few lessons. Lessons? With whom? Helena laughed. You play perfectly. You don't need anything else. But, no buts. You'll perform at the event, publicly thank me for the opportunity I gave you, and help me build a socially responsible image. Helena stepped dangerously close. Unless you'd prefer to be unemployed again. At that moment, Dr. Roberto walked into the office. A man in his 50s with graying hair, whom Miguel rarely saw. He looked agitated. Helena, we need to talk. I'm busy, Roberto. It's about the violinist. Roberto looked at Miguel, then back at his wife. I got an interesting phone call today. Helena frowned. What kind of phone call? From Maestro Silveira, from the conservatory. He was curious about our protégé. Asked a few questions about his training, how we discovered him. Roberto paused. I think he's suspicious. Miguel felt the blood drain from his face. Maestro Silveira was a legend in Brazilian classical music. If he was digging, suspicious of what? Helena asked, but there was nervousness in her voice. That our story doesn't add up. A janitor who plays like a professional, with no formal training, no musical background? Roberto shook his head. He wants to do a preliminary interview with Miguel before the event. Helena went pale. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? Miguel asked, his voice firmer than he'd intended. They both turned to him, as if they had forgotten he was in the room. Because, Helena stammered, because you don't have experience with interviews. You might say something wrong. But Miguel saw something different in her eyes. He saw fear. What kind of thing? Roberto sighed. Miguel, do you really have no formal music education? Never studied at a conservatory? Never had private lessons? I had a few lessons as a child, but how many lessons? With whom? When? Roberto was asking the same questions Maestro Silveira would. Miguel took a deep breath. I studied for 3 years with Professor Antonio Cardoso. He had a small school in the neighborhood. Then when my mother got sick, I had to stop. Antonio Cardoso? Roberto raised his eyebrows. I know that name. He wasn't just a neighborhood teacher. He was a respected violinist who retired from the municipal theater. Helena was visibly nervous now. That doesn't matter. What matters is that Miguel plays well now. It does matter, Roberto insisted. Because if Maestro Silveira finds out Miguel trained with Antonio Cardoso, our story of raw talent from the slums falls apart. Something clicked in Miguel's mind. You want me to lie about my background? It's not a lie, Helena said quickly. It's an adaptation of the truth, more appealing to the media. More appealing to your campaign, Miguel corrected, feeling a growing anger. Watch your tone, Helena warned, but there was desperation in her voice. At that moment, a third person entered the office. A woman around 40, elegant, holding a voice recorder. Sorry to interrupt, she said. I'm Luciana Mendez, a journalist from Veja magazine. I came to do a piece on the charity performance. Helena froze. No, we hadn't scheduled anything. Maestro Silveira gave me the contact. He thought it'd be interesting to do a story on hidden talents. Luciana smiled at Miguel. You must be the famous violinist. Can I ask you a few questions? Miguel looked at Helena, then at Roberto. Both seemed on the verge of a heart attack. Sure, he replied. Great. First, tell me about your musical background. Where did you study? Helena stepped in. Miguel is a natural talent. He taught himself with a lot of effort and dedication. Interesting, Luciana jotted down. And your family? Any musicians? My mother, Miguel began, but Helena interrupted. His mother was a seamstress. Simple, hard-working people. Luciana was writing everything down, but Miguel saw that she noticed the tension in the room. Miguel, can you speak for yourself? She asked gently. Miguel looked at Helena, saw the panic in her eyes, and for the first time in months, felt power. My mother was a seamstress, that's true, he began slowly. But she made sure I had violin lessons when I was a child. I studied with Professor Antonio Cardoso for 3 years. Helena turned ghostly pale. Miguel? Antonio Cardoso? Luciana raised her eyebrows. The former concertmaster of the municipal theater? That's impressive. Why did you stop studying? My mother got sick. We needed the money for her treatment. Miguel felt tears forming. I sold my violin to buy her medicine. What a touching story. And how did you end up here? How did the Almeida family find you? Miguel looked at Helena, who was visibly shaking. I've worked here for 3 years, as a domestic employee, a janitor. The silence that followed was deafening. Luciana stopped writing and looked at Helena. So you didn't discover a talent. You've had a talented employee for years? Helena opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. It's more complicated than that. How complicated? Luciana was clearly intrigued now. Roberto tried to salvage the situation. Helena has always supported her staff. When she discovered Miguel's talent, she immediately encouraged him. Encouraged how? Paid for lessons, bought instruments, arranged performances. More silence. Miguel felt something break inside him. She forced me to play at her parties, for the same salary, using my talent to impress her friends. Miguel! Helena shouted. It's true, he continued, his voice growing stronger. She told me I was just a janitor who played the violin, that I shouldn't confuse talent with importance. Luciana scribbled furiously. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. Miguel turned to Helena. You wanted to use my story for your political campaign, wanted me to lie about my background to seem more interesting. Helena was visibly desperate now. You're ruining everything. No, Miguel replied, feeling stronger with every word. I'm telling the truth. Roberto made one last attempt. Journalist, perhaps it would be better to continue this interview another time. No, Luciana replied firmly. This story is turning out to be far more interesting than I imagined. She turned to Miguel. Do you still play? Regularly? Every night, alone, in the attic. It's the only time I feel truly alive. And what would you like to do with your talent? Miguel took a deep breath. It was the first time in years someone had asked him that. I'd like to teach children, kids like I once was, to show them that music isn't a luxury for the wealthy, that talent can be born anywhere. Helena was breathing heavily. Miguel, think about what you're doing, your career, your future. What career? What future? Miguel stared at her. Being your decorative prop for the rest of my life? Luciana closed the recorder. I think I have enough material for a very compelling article. And right there, in that room full of cold stares, he decided to do what no one expected. The journalist had left 10 minutes ago, but the silence in the office was deafening. Helena paced back and forth, her hands trembling, her face red with rage and desperation. You destroyed everything, she repeated like a mantra. Everything. My reputation, my campaign, my image. Miguel remained standing, calmer than he had been in months. I just told the truth. Truth? Helena laughed, but it was a hysterical laugh. You think anyone cares about your version of the truth? You're nobody, a janitor. Who's going to believe you over me? Roberto tried to intervene. Helena, maybe we should think about damage control. Damage control? She spun to her husband. He just told a national journalist that I exploited my employee, that I lied about discovering talent. That will ruin any political chance I have. Good, Miguel said softly. Helena stopped pacing. What did you say? I said, good. People like you shouldn't have power over others. The slap came fast and hard. Miguel felt the sting on his cheek, but he didn't flinch. You're nothing but a parasite, Helena screamed. Living off me, using my house, my violin, my generosity. Miguel touched his burning cheek, but something had changed in his eyes. Generosity? You paid me to clean your house, then forced me to play for your friends, for the same salary. Where is the generosity? I gave you opportunities. I put you in contact with important people. You used me as a trophy, as an exotic object to impress your guests. Miguel stepped closer, and for the first time, Helena recoiled. You knew I had talent 3 years ago. 3 years. And what did you do? You kept me invisible, until you needed me. Roberto tried to position himself between them. Miguel, I know you're hurt, but... Hurt? Miguel laughed bitterly. Doctor, do you know how many times your wife called me just a janitor who plays violin? Do you know how many times she told me not to confuse talent with importance? Roberto looked at Helena, who had gone pale. She told me my mother was just a seamstress, that nobody cared about my struggles. Miguel felt tears welling up and couldn't hold them back. My mother died working so I could have music lessons. She sold her own dresses to pay Professor Antonio. And your wife spat on her memory. Helena trembled. I didn't say that. You did. Verbatim. His mother was a seamstress. You're a janitor who plays violin. Miguel stared at her. You turned my pain into fuel for your vanity. At that moment, Beatrice appeared in the doorway. She had heard everything. Mom, she said softly. Did you really say that? Helena turned to her daughter. Beatrice, you don't understand. He's not distorting anything. Beatrice stepped into the room, her eyes shining with tears. I saw how you treated him, how you treat all the staff, how you treat me, too. Beatrice. No, Mom. Enough. The 16-year-old looked like she was 40. You collect people. You collect talents. You want me to play piano not because you love me, but because it looks good to have a musician daughter. Miguel looked at the girl with compassion. She was going through the same thing he had. You want Miguel to lie about his training because the truth doesn't serve your campaign, Beatrice continued. You don't care about his talent. You care how you can use it. Roberto sighed deeply. Helena, maybe we should rethink. Rethink what? Helena exploded. You're all against me? I gave that man a job. I gave him opportunities. And this is how he thanks me? Opportunities? Miguel felt anger rising. What opportunities? Playing hidden in the attic? Being humiliated in front of your friends? Pretending I don't have training to look more interesting? You don't have training. A few childhood lessons aren't real training. 3 years with Antonio Cardoso. 3 years learning technique, theory, music history. Until he told me I had potential to be professional. Miguel approached her dangerously. But you preferred the version where I was a natural talent, discovered by your generosity. Helena was cornered. You never told me about Professor Antonio. You never asked. In 3 years working here, you never asked about my life, my story, my dreams. Miguel found a strength he didn't know he possessed. You only asked if I played violin because you needed an emergency replacement. That's not true. It is true, and now everyone will know. Miguel headed for the door. The journalist will publish the article. People will know how you really treat your employees. You can't do this to me. Miguel stopped in the doorway and turned. I didn't do anything to you. You did it to yourself. Helena ran after him. Miguel, wait. We can talk. We can make a deal. What kind of deal? I can give you a raise. I can promote you. You can be my personal assistant. Miguel shook his head. You still don't get it. It's not about money, it's about dignity. Dignity? Helena laughed nervously. You want dignity? Then go find another job. Go play on the streets. Go be a real musician. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Helena stopped laughing. What? I'm leaving. I'm going to find another job. And I'm going to play. Not to impress your friends, but to honor my mother's memory. You won't succeed. You're a janitor. Without me, you're nothing. Miguel looked at her with a mix of pity and determination. Donna Helena, you spent 3 years telling me I was invisible, that I was just an employee, that I was without importance. He paused. But today, when the journalist asked me what I wanted to do with my talent, I found the answer. What answer? Teach. Teach children like I once was. Show that music is not a privilege of the rich. That talent can be born anywhere, grow under any conditions. Miguel smiled for the first time in months. I'm going to open a music school in my neighborhood, for poor children, like my mother wanted me to. Helena turned pale. You don't have the money for that. No, but I have something better. I have a story. And now, thanks to the journalist, everyone will know that story. Roberto stepped forward. Miguel, are you sure? Leaving everything just like this? Doctor, I spent 3 years cleaning this house. 3 years being invisible. 3 years burying my talent to keep a job. Miguel took a deep breath. Today I discovered I'd rather be poor and dignified than comfortable and humiliated. Beatriz approached him. Miguel, you will succeed. I believe in you. Miguel smiled at the girl. Thank you, Beatriz. And you, don't give up on the piano. Not for your mother, but for yourself. Music is freedom, not imprisonment. Helena was desperate now. Miguel, please, think about the article. When it comes out, they'll crucify me. My reputation. My campaign. You should have thought about that before treating me like an object. I can change. I can be different. Miguel looked at her sadly. Donna Helena, you told me I should not confuse talent with importance. Today I discovered that you confused money with character. He headed for the door, but Helena ran and threw herself in front of him. Please, I beg you, call the journalist. Say you were mistaken. Say I always treated you well. Miguel looked into her eyes. Would I lie? As you wanted me to lie about my training? Helena began to cry. Miguel, I need this campaign. It's my dream. It's all I have. Your dreams can't be built on the humiliation of others. Miguel left the room, climbed to the attic, and retrieved the violin. When he came down, Helena was still crying in the office. He passed through the front door, not the back one. He left as a free man. On the street, he looked back one last time. He saw Beatrice in the window, waving. He saw Roberto comforting Helena. He saw a mansion that no longer intimidated him. Miguel placed the violin on his shoulder and played one last song on the sidewalk. Ave Maria, the same he had played that first night. But now it was different. Now it was his. Some neighbors stopped to listen. Children came closer, curious. When he finished, they applauded. Do you teach? Asked a little girl about 8 years old. Miguel smiled. I will teach. Soon I'll teach. He left that place without looking back. But something had changed. He was no longer invisible. Never would be again. 6 months later, Luciana Mendez's article had come out on the cover of Revista Veja. The Invisible Talent, How a Millionaire Exploited Her Musician Employee. The impact was devastating for Helena and transformative for Miguel. Helena Almeida withdrew her candidacy for federal deputy. The party cited personal issues, but everyone knew the real reason. The story had gone viral on social media, with hashtags like Trier's Invisible Talent and Dash Music for All. Helena became a symbol of everything wrong with the Brazilian elite. Miguel, on the other hand, had become a public figure. Not in the way Helena had planned, but in an authentic, real way. Invitations for interviews arrived weekly, offers from record labels, conservatories, orchestras, but he declined them all. Professor Miguel, can I try again? The voice of Carla, 9 years old, daughter of a cleaning lady, brought Miguel back to the present. He was in the small room he had rented downtown, transformed into the Rosa Maria Music School, a tribute to his mother. Sure, Carla. Remember what we talked about posture? The girl straightened her shoulders, placed the violin correctly, and began to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It wasn't perfect, but it was pure. It was true. At the back of the room, Miguel saw other children waiting their turn. Juanzinho, son of a street cleaner. Maria, daughter of a seamstress, like his mother had been. Pedro, son of a security guard. All children invisible to society's eyes. All with a special sparkle in their eyes when they played. Very good, Carla. You're getting better every day. The girl smiled, toothless. Professor, will I ever play like you? You'll play better, Miguel answered, and he truly believed it. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. Miguel opened it and found an elegant woman in her 50s, tears in her eyes. Are you Professor Miguel? Yes, ma'am. How can I help you? I'm Mariana Cardoso, daughter of Professor Antonio Cardoso. Miguel felt his heart race. Your father. My father died 2 years ago, but he talked a lot about you. He said you were one of the most talented students he ever had. She wiped her eyes. He found out you had to stop lessons because of your mother. He was a great man, a great teacher. When the article came out in the magazine, I remembered your name. My father left all his instruments to me. Violins, violas, cellos. Mariana smiled. I would like to donate them to your school. Miguel was speechless. Ma'am, that's very generous, but it's not generosity. It's justice. My father believed music should be for everyone. He'd be proud knowing his instruments are being used by kids like you once were. 2 weeks later, the school had transformed. 20 new instruments, donated by Mariana. More volunteers arriving to help, the waiting list growing daily. Miguel was tuning a violin when Beatrice appeared at the door. Hi, Miguel. Beatrice, what a nice surprise. He hugged her. The girl looked different, lighter, happier. I came to tell you some news. I got a scholarship to study piano at the conservatory. Wonderful. Your mother must be proud. Beatrice made a face. She hasn't been talking much to me since I said I supported you in the interview I gave to Fantastico. I'm sorry. I'm not. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something because I want to, not because she wants me to. Beatrice smiled. You inspired me, Miguel. To be brave. At that moment, the door opened again. Miguel turned and was shocked. It was Helena. She looked different. Thinner, without makeup, wearing simple clothes. She seemed to have aged 10 years. Miguel, she said softly, Can I talk to you? Beatrice whispered. I'll leave you two alone. Helena entered the room, looking around. She saw the children practicing, the instruments, the walls decorated with childish drawings. You made it, she murmured. Made what? Your dream. You made your dream come true. Miguel said nothing. He waited. I came to apologize. Helena continued, her voice breaking. Not because I expect your forgiveness, but because I need to say it. You were right. About everything. Donna Helena? No, let me finish. I spent months thinking about what you said. About confusing money with character. About using people as trophies. She wiped her eyes. I lost everything. The campaign, my reputation, many friends. And you know what the hardest part was? Miguel waited, realizing I deserved to lose all of it, because I built everything on the humiliation of others, on exploitation, on lies. Helena approached a small violin and touched it gently. Your mother must be proud, she said. Wherever she is, she must be proud. Miguel felt tears in his eyes. I hope so. I also lost my mother early, Helena went on. But the difference is she left me money, not values. You inherited something far more valuable. Donna Helena, why did you come here? Because I want to help. Financially. Anonymously. I don't want credit, I don't want recognition. I just want to try to make up for some of the harm I caused. Miguel looked at her for a long moment. I accept. But on one condition. What? That you come once a month, see the children, see what your money is building. Not as an owner, but as a visitor. To remember that behind every employee, every invisible person, there is a human being. Helena nodded, crying openly now. And Donna Helena, thank you. For what? Because if you hadn't treated me so badly, I would never have found my strength. I would never have discovered who I really am. Helena smiled through her tears. Sometimes, the worst that happens to us is what changes us the most. She left the school, but before going away, she stopped to listen to the children playing. For the first time in years, music wasn't about status or impressing anyone. It was about pure joy. Miguel stayed at the door watching his students, Carla trying Ode to Joy, Juanzinho practicing scales, Maria experimenting with a new chord. His mother, Rosa Maria, always said music was the language of the soul. At that moment, Miguel fully understood what she meant. He was no longer an invisible employee, no longer a hidden talent. He was Professor Miguel, the man who turned pain into purpose, humiliation into strength, invisibility into light. At 6 in the evening, when the last child left, Miguel took his violin. Not the old instrument from the mansion, but a new one, bought with the first donations. He played Ave Maria once again, but now it was different. It wasn't to impress anyone. It wasn't out of obligation. It was a prayer, a celebration, a promise. The promise that every child, no matter where they come from, deserves to be seen, deserves to be heard, deserves to dream. Miguel left the school and walked through the streets of his neighborhood, no longer as an invisible man, but as someone who had found his light, and who now helped others find theirs. At the corner, he stopped and looked back. In the school window, still lit, was written, Rosa Maria Music School, where every talent is visible. He smiled and kept walking. Tomorrow would be another day of lessons, another day of transforming lives through music, another day honoring his mother's memory. And for the first time in decades, Miguel felt whole. If this story touched you as much as it touched me writing it, please leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because there are millions of invisible Miguels out there, waiting for someone to see their talent, their dignity, their humanity. And maybe, after hearing this story, you'll start seeing the janitor in your building, the cleaning lady in your office, the security guard in your condominium differently. Maybe you'll stop and ask, how was your day? Do you have kids? What's your dream? Because we all have a story. We all have talent. We all deserve to be seen. And if you know someone who, like Miguel, has a hidden talent, don't let them stay invisible. Sometimes all a person needs is someone who believes in them. Don't go yet. The video on your screen now has an even more unbelievable twist. Click and find me there.